Hi everyone, thanks for coming. We're glad that you're here. Today we're going to talk about the acquisition workforce, and we have a variety of perspectives on the panel. I'll just tell you briefly who they are and then we'll launch into it. So to my immediate right, Dennis Smiley, who's the Deputy Chief Procurement Officer at DHS. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
And next to him is Iris Cooper, the Senior Procurement Executive at Treasury, who I've known for more years than I can say.
That's not HR.
And then next to Iris is Max Weich from DoD. He's the Executive Director for HR Strategic Programs and Advisory Services. So he'll bring more of the HR perspective, I think, but he's been working in the acquisition workforce arena as well. So thanks for coming. And last but certainly not least is Melissa Storinsky, who is the Director of the Federal Acquisition Institute that provides training and development for civilian agency acquisition professionals, among other things. So we're glad to have you here as well. So I just wanted to get a feel for the audience, and while you're sitting there, be thinking of some questions, because I think a big part of this panel will be to answer your questions, to make sure that we can get to why you came here today, that we can answer your questions. But who in the audience would consider themselves an HR person? Okay, quite a few. How about acquisition person? So maybe half and half.
Yeah.
That's a good mix. And then second question, who in the audience is government? And who is industry? I see a little more industry, so that's great. We're glad to have you here. We love to talk to our industry partners. So I'm going to lay the groundwork real briefly for the acquisition workforce. I participate in meetings at OPM because acquisition is considered a mission critical occupation. So many of the other functional areas are kind of envious of where we are with the acquisition function, because we have a fairly mature program, I think. Our folks have a positive education requirement. We have certification programs for the three major areas, the functional areas: contracting officers representatives, and program managers. So we have well-established certification programs that Melissa helps to run. We have had an increase of 15% in certifications in the contracting officers in the last 8 years. Just dug that statistic up yesterday. We have a very sophisticated workforce management system. So at OMB, where I reside in the Office of Federal Procurement Policy, I can look across the civilian agencies and see the health of the acquisition workforce, the numbers, the certifications. I can even drill down to like one person in the acquisition workforce. My stepdaughter works at the FBI, and I can say, oh, she took a few classes last year. That's good. She's a COR. Don't tell her I know how to do that, okay? Our little secret. But so one of the background pieces of information for this panel was that there might be a shortfall of acquisition folks. And I'm of the opinion, I don't think there is. So DoD has been able to staff up its acquisition workforce by about 10% in the last 5 years or so. Max might talk to that some. The civilian agency workforce has held steady, but a couple of things in the environment have changed. So contract spending has decreased from $500 billion to $450 billion. And then something that's on the horizon the last year is category management, which is the next step after strategic sourcing. And the basic thought is the contracting folks don't have to do a new contract every time they buy a commodity item like an IT purchase or a software. There's contracts in place that they should use, and then they can spend their time and energy on more complex or high-vis contracts. So I think that tells me that if we can push that out in the government, that the contracting folks will have more time to spend on the important things, and it's easier to do the commodities. So I feel like we're at a pretty good spot with numbers, but let's see what these guys think. They're the experts. So given all of this information, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing the federal acquisition workforce today? And we're going to start with Iris.
So while I generally would agree with you, I think that I don't think we have a shortfall. I think we have a shortfall of the right people. 15% increase in certification sounds wonderful. In reality, it means we have minimally qualified people that are certified. So I think just looking at the increase in certifications is not a reflection of the quality of our workforce. And while I will say some critical things, I love my acquisition workforce. I grew up as a CO in the Air Force. This is critically important to me that we treat our people right. But I think the big challenge is over the last 10 years, the trend I've seen, we have created a workforce, and I hate to say dumbed down, that can fill out templates really well. There is no analytics behind it. They know how to fill out the template. They know how to push it through the system. And we have overburdened them with policies, with guidance as a result of, I don't know, we have 1 million executive orders. Not that I'm saying they're bad, you know, but they all place a burden on the contracting workforce and how we do business. So we have complicated the business tremendously. We have papered it up to create this risk-adverse environment. Every GAO report, every IG report draws with it 1 million different policies to protect us even more. So these are the same kids where we're telling them, go be creative and innovative. And I will tell you, I have had plenty of examples in my organization of innovation gone wrong, where just because you didn't get a protest that wasn't right what you did was creative, all right, but not in the way we'd want it. So I think there are many, many challenges that require some senior leadership to get these kids back on track and to give them the time to grow. We are actually making a concerted effort not to certify when they meet the minimum. I think we're putting them at risk if we give these certifications and hand them a warrant like cookie cutter, you know, they all expect it. And we need to level set that expectation. Giving you an unlimited warrant just because you have 4 years of experience cannot be the right answer to run a complex acquisition. So, my concern, so.
Good perspective. And how about you, Dennis?
Did anyone ever apply for a government job in here besides the feds and look at it and say, wow, that is a long, long process to get a government job? Here's my question. What is the right number? You know, we often say, you know, we don't have qualified people, we don't have enough people, we don't have this, but what is the right number of acquisition professionals to do the job that you need to get done? I can argue that I need this number, somebody will argue we need this number. So we maintain a status quo that we go forward with and say, here's the number that we want, we submit that number and say, here's the status quo. But as things change, and you know, when I hear numbers like, hey, spend is going down, that doesn't mean requisitions are going down. That means spend is going down. People are getting more creative now, submit more requisitions. So I agree with Iris here, you know, we have to train a good qualified workforce. We do that in DHS with the Acquisition Professional Career Program with the APCPs. We have a 3-year program, you know, and then we just brought 20 individuals on, I mean, you know, just this week. So we got a 3-year program we take them through, and we make sure they're trained. But at the end of that program, we got to make sure that they receive the training and the qualifications they need to do their job. But more importantly, they really need good supervision. You know, because what I hear now is, hey, the baby boomers, and someone told me I'm a boomer. I'm like, woo, I said, that's pretty cool. You know, so you're eligible, and I'm like, well, what does that mean? That I'm eligible. I mean, you know, and it's like, so, but we need to maintain that group as well, because sometimes we focus on the group of, you know, to say, okay, we got to get these people trained, and we're worried about up here. But in the middle is where we need to really get those individuals. So someone asked me the other day, what's the right grades for the jobs that they do? And again, that comes with, you know, a good baseline study and a workload study and staffing mix and all this good stuff. I don't know what that right mix really is until you analyze the job criteria. You have to analyze the job. And once we have a good job analysis done, it's easy to put on paper, this is what we believe it is, but what's the right staffing model? I mean, I don't know what that is, and I hope my colleagues or somebody can tell me what that right staffing model. We have a staffing model, don't get me wrong. DHS has a staffing model. We use that staffing model, but not everybody uses the same staffing model. So what is the right staffing model? If you're doing 100% cost type contracts, you know, you need more people, right? You know, if you're doing simplified acquisitions, you might need more people because you're doing 1,000 of them. So, but you need qualified people. I mean, that's what we're looking for. So, and to get those people, sometimes to grow your own. But in this area, it's robbing from my counterparts. I mean, you know, because this is a high area. I mean, you know, you start saying, hey, this is what we have to do. We put the announcements out, we get qualified people, we call, we do all this great stuff. And then all at once, my neighbor has a shortfall. You know, and is that a good thing? But I've seen some good things coming out. I mean, you know, that I think we should institute, and I don't know if you want me, but student loans. We used to do that. Should we institute that again to say, hey, you know, we'll help you pay your student loan if you give us 5 years boom? I mean, I thought it was a great program. You got good qualified people. And they gave you a commitment, and they were committed. And they stayed. And they stayed. They not only, you know, said, hey, I'll give you 5 years. Wow, this is really great. The government's a great place to work. Regardless of what the paper says, the government is a great place to work. I love the government. I've been doing this, you know, for 40-some years. I love working in the government. It's a great place to work. We do great things, regardless of what the news says, you know, and we continue to do great things. So I'll let my colleagues jump in. I don't want to, you know, but it's getting those people in the door, but it's also when you get them in the door, do your stay interview, which is, you know, meet one-on-one with those individuals, build trust with them, you know, tell them, find out what motivates them, what doesn't motivate them, what we can use for positive reinforcement, you know, lessons learned. I mean, we're doing a lot of great things with the Procurement Innovation Lab and other things, but we're getting people a little more creative, you know, so, and all that. I'm sorry, I mean, I'll let colleagues jump in here, but I really love what I do, I mean, so.
We can tell. I think all of us up here feel the same way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know
It's
we
great
do.
to see. So we're fortunate to have Melissa here, who's the training and development arm for the civilian agency. So given everything you've heard, what do you think the biggest challenge is?
All right, and so I'd like to comment about my perspective on the staffing model. So I too, like Iris, came up as a contracting officer myself. I started at the end of the 1980s. And I've probably spent more than half of my career in contracting operations, so I have a real understanding and appreciation of the challenges being faced by the people on the front lines. And I came into the system in a staffing model where post-award was separated from pre-award contract activities. And we shifted probably around the mid-1990s, toward the end of the 90s, to the cradle-to-grave staffing model, where the contracting officer was expected to be an expert in the full acquisition life cycle. And I'm just sharing with you my perspective and the value of the experience that I had as I came up the ranks. So first and foremost, I started in contract administration. So I learned how to become a really good problem solver before I was forced to work on pre-award activities where it's speed, you know, there's a need for speed, get it done fast. So I kind of eased my way into the business, and I was fixing everything on the post-award side so that when I eventually got to the pre-award side, I was better, I knew what not to do. Okay, and I think there was value too. Oftentimes there's a pride in authorship, right? And so if you were the one responsible for creating a mess on the back end, are you going to fess up and admit that you caused a problem? And so I think it's worth perhaps revisiting, and some people frankly are better with the pace, you know, the need for speed on the pre-award activities, and other people are better at problem solving. And so there may be opportunity to look at you know, that staffing model. Another thing that I will say was toward the end of the 90s, we were downsizing government, we were outsourcing more, there was a lot more contracts that we were placing with industry. And out of necessity, operational COs had to start carrying a full-time workload themselves. When I came up in the system, I will tell you, my first 5 to 7 years, I had contracting officers whose primary responsibility was mentoring me, course correcting me very early. We do not have the luxury of that today. And I think we need to go back to that model. We need to get that workload off of that CO so that they really can get back and have the time to properly review work. They're pressed. They're just signing off on stuff that they probably don't feel very comfortable about, and you in industry are getting the results of that. And they're frustrated. They're feeling frustrated that I'm not confident that I'm putting good stuff out there, but I don't have the time to thoroughly give the review to the work that I'm reviewing. And so, you know, I will encourage, and even when I was in operations, we were doing a lot of benchmarking studies around staffing models, and our goal was to try to get that workload off of that CO, to get back to a model where the CO has the time that they need to properly review the work, to properly mentor, to course correct early so that these bad behaviors and practices don't perpetuate into the future. I will also, I don't think it's a capacity issue. I think we have tremendous opportunity to be much leaner in the way in which we conduct our business. And as Iris said, I've seen a lot of innovation gone wrong too. So we talk about and we preach, oh, we want you to be creative and innovative, but I believe in the federal acquisition regulation. It's a tried and true system that tries to strike the right balance of fulfillment of public policy objectives and the execution of best value procurements and services in support of agency missions. And if you understand it correctly, if you apply it correctly, it can be done fast, it can be done right. And so with that said, one of our priorities for the year is developing what we're calling a Back to Basics series. I've coached a lot of youth sports over the years, and fundamentals is what wins you games. And so we're going to try to roll out a Back to Basics series that really reinforces those fundamentals. And if you focus on those things and get really good at those things, I think the system will work much better. So I'll stop there and let my colleagues talk.
Let's take advantage of Max's experience with a broader functional workforce.
Okay.
And what's your take on the acquisition workforce as you look at it compared to the broader federal workforce?
Okay. Well, first I'd like to say I appreciate the opportunity to be here. So definitely looking forward to learning a lot today and sharing with you all. The acquisition workforce as compared to the overall workforce in DoD, the acquisition workforce is very complex and very large. It also overlays a lot of other functional communities. So the way we do our strategic workforce planning, we really do it by functional communities within the Department of Defense. However, the acquisition workforce overlays a lot of those functional communities, so we have a lot of teamwork that goes on in terms of the planning and the execution. It's growing. Many of you probably read the GAO report, growing over 25,000 over the last 7 years, so a little bit over 150,000 now. It's a well-funded workforce. We have special incentive programs and special incentive funds that some federal agencies don't have when it comes to strengthening our acquisition workforce, so we've got to figure out how to fully leverage those funds and those programs as we move forward. The Defense Acquisition Workforce Fund, Improvement Fund, very skilled workforce. When you look at the certification levels and the certification requirements for the position, about 96% of our acquisition workforce members are certified to their position or on track to get certified to that position timely. So that's very promising, and a lot of work has been done there over the past 5 or 6 years to get the workforce to that point. Very educated. When you look at the overall DoD workforce, about 83% of our acquisition workforce members have a bachelor's degree. When you look at the overall DoD workforce, it's below 50%. So, and that's across the over about 800,000 employees. We spend a lot of time and invest a lot of money in leadership development for our acquisition workforce. Not just leadership development in terms of our 14s and 15s, but we also have leadership development programs that start as low as the GS7 level, where we bring them into emerging leaders programs that run a couple of years, and we actually build cohorts and work them through leadership development programs. I think that's very important that we build those leaders at an early level. I mentioned the Acquisition Workforce Improvement Fund before, but we also have those funds supporting our incentive programs, student loan repayment, I think Dennis mentioned before, that we really like to fully leverage across our services, and we see varied use when we look at the components and a lot of difference between the Army, Navy, and Air Force and our DoD agencies and how they leverage those funds. Recruitment, relocation, retention bonuses, those kind of things. We've got to make sure that we fully leverage those, still being responsible with the dollars, but making sure that we have those programs in place and that our HR professionals know how to administer those programs effectively and advise managers. Using those acquisition dollars to lead turn vacancies. So it's easy to go out and hire somebody, but how can you hire them on time? One of the things we've done with the DALDA funds, the Workforce Improvement Funds, is actually build positions earlier prior to need, looking at our strategic workforce planning, at the lower levels, not necessarily the DoD level, but when you get down to the component and the installation level, being able to track when you think you'll have attrition in certain areas, and go ahead and hire those people a year or two ahead of time and let them train and let them develop. And then the day somebody retires, somebody's already been working beside them for 6 months. And you've got to be able to effectively use that across the board. And then when I look at the acquisition workforce, they're in high demand. Just the skills they develop, the education they get, the amount of time we spend on training and certification, they're in high demand within the Department of Defense. They're in high demand within other federal agencies. We have pockets where we see a lot of other federal agencies hiring DoD acquisition personnel, and that's okay. But sometimes we're a training bed for the federal agencies, but also the private sector as well. I mean, those are great assets that we're developing, so we have to keep an eye on turnover rates and those kind of things.
We'll happily take all of your acquisition people.
Sometimes we can't develop them fast enough.
Yes, so as you can surmise, there's a very different funding model for training and developing the defense acquisition workforce versus the civilian acquisition workforce. Not to whine or anything, but it's a drastic difference. So that makes the civilian agencies have to be a bit more creative in how they train and develop their workforce. So let's turn to that a little bit. So Dennis, at DHS, you've recently established, you mentioned a Procurement Innovation Lab. So can you talk a little bit about that and what you hope to get out of it?
Here's what we look for. It's called the Procurement Innovation Lab. I mean, as it was mentioned, and here's what we're doing. I mean, you know, some of these things are great ideas. Some of them are ideas that are, say, guess what? We do this. Let me give you an example. I mean, what we want being able to say, bring in innovation. Bring it into the lab. And the lab is just a group of people, by the way. It's not a basement lab and all this other good stuff, you know. It's a group of individuals. We get together and we say, hey, here's a concept. And a concept is, how can we streamline, how can we do this better? Here's a prime example. Oral presentations is not new, right? But, you know, with oral presentations, what happened in one of our procurements, they brought in and say, hey, how can we reach consensus? Can we get rid of the technical report and just go to consensus? Had a procurement go through, and I won't explain the whole procurement, but it was a major procurement, millions of dollars, went through, come into the lab and said, this is what we want to do. Went into oral presentations, 4 hours later reached consensus. Okay, so the people in the room, technical team, consensus report, done. Right? And then you get the argument, well, what about the technical report? Well, do you need it when you get all four in a room and you just reach consensus? So within 7 days, I mean, you know, when you look at that stuff, you're like, hey, great news, right? So that worked well. Another one we did, you know, with major procurement with Einstein 3, I mean, you know, a major multi-million-dollar procurement. What did we do? 89 days. Because we did steps in there to eliminate technical things that we really don't need. You know, I'm a firm believer of the FAR. I mean, you know, it's 2,000 pages or something. You know, and if you can get through all 2,000 pages, let me know. I mean, you know, and a lot of us read it. I mean, don't get me wrong, we do read it. I mean, you know, but it also says in there to be innovative and give flexibilities to CEOs, program individuals. That's what we're trying to do with the procurement lab. We're trying to get ideas in there to say, how can we do this and streamline the process? Take the risk away from the individuals, which means myself as a deputy and a CPO, Soraya Korea, we own it. If something fails, we own it. They don't own it, we own it. We live up to it. If it succeeds, great things. We just had a nice celebration on Monday or Tuesday, I mean, in all hands, for the procurements that went through, and just, you know, gave little awards out to individuals that actually pushed this through, okay, and did these things.
Hey, Dennis, where do you publish, like, lessons learned, best practices that are coming out? Are you great?
You need to repeat the question.
Kate, I'm a very
Somebody needs to
No, you
repeat
just
the
need to
phone.
repeat the
Well,
question.
somebody.
Yeah, excuse me.
No, I thought somebody else was talking.
No. I should have mentioned this in the beginning. Two things, and I apologize. One is, can everybody put their phone on mute so that the speakers and the audience in the room can hear the questions and answers? And the second is, and I should have said this in the beginning, and I apologize, this is off the record, which means nothing industry or government alike, or press, is to quote anything that's said here today. It is being videotaped. A link will be up on our members site. But if anybody needs a quote for any reason, let me know and we'll put you in touch with the appropriate agency PR folks. So I apologize. Please put your phone on mute.
Okay. Question. The question was, do we publish this or do we post it? Is there lessons learned? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Here's where it's published, DHS Connect, okay? We do publish the PIL. And the great part about this is, you know, we do have lessons learned. And the great part is, you know, the CO, the contract specialist, the tech people, we have webinars, I mean, that are done. We call them lunchtime learning, and some of them are just, you know, what's the other one? I forget the name of it. It just went through. But I mean, we have these webinars, and the webinars are really good because it reaches a broad audience across DHS. The webinars are done by the individuals that did the program. So you have the CEO, the CS, the tech person actually providing the best practices, the lessons learned. We join in. You know, a lot of our heads of contracting agencies across DHS, this is not just central to, you know, just in-house. This is across the 8 buying agencies. So those things are published. We do lessons learned. And we make sure that, you know, that's what we really want to capture. What's the best practice? So if we can capture that best practice and disseminate that throughout, we can think things, I mean, you know, when it's mentioned, go back to basics. You know, some of those things are back to basics. Why are we doing, you know, a Part 16 and using Part 15 procedures, which means we're using, you know, task order, delivery order, but we want to go into negotiation procedures. You know, why are we doing that? It's getting back to basics. You know, that'll streamline the process. You know, but I hope I answered your question. I mean, you know, we'll publish that. We'll let you know. I mean, you know, make sure it gets out to the group here, you know, to let you know exactly where, click here, and what the PIL is all about, because it is a way to take risk. But the beauty of it is we own it. When I say we own it, that corporate owns it. You know, and then we look at things to say, is it really, you know, something that's innovative, creative? Should we look at it or shouldn't we look at it? But we have a good team that does these things. I mean, we got about 9 projects right now setting in appeal that we're looking at. So, and it does work. And it does work, and it's getting back to basics.
Yeah,
and a lot of it, I agree with you.
Yeah, and I just couldn't emphasize as much as Dennis already had, that the importance of providing that top cover to the folks that are on the front lines and giving them permission to let go of things that they don't need to be doing. Well-intentioned. There's a lot of well-intentioned practices that we as a community do. That, and then I always say, ask yourself 3 questions. Is it required by law or regulation? Is it adding value? Or are we doing it as a result of a conscious decision, you know, response to a GAO or an IG study? So there's a lot of practices that go on, well-intentioned, that may not need to be done. And so it's incumbent upon us as leaders to give our workforce the permission and top cover to start letting go of all of this extraneous stuff that they don't need to be doing, that gives, you know, presents a further burden to industry. And so there's lots of opportunity, like Dennis mentioned. One of my favorites is on GSA schedule buys. There is nothing in the FAR that says that you have to withhold the pricing to the program people. And I actually hear in a lot of cases that the contracting officer won't even let the customer look at the pricing information. There's nothing in there that precludes us from giving the technical people both the technical and the price at the same time. Now, there may be local agency supplemental regulations that limit that, but the pushback that I've gotten when I've talked with people about this is, oh, well, the program people can then game it. They'll game the procurement to go to the company that they want to go to. And I've said, well, then we've got a bigger issue of trust, you know, or lack thereof. And so, you know, that's just one example of, and I could probably give you 200 of things that we can do to make the system work better that's already available to us within the construct of the FAR. But based on how you interpret it and how you apply it, there's a lot of steps that we undertake sometimes that are not necessary. And so we'll actually, at FAI, I do this presentation, it's called the Top 10 Tangible Techniques to Trim Time. All right, say it. It's my tongue twister series. And in fact, I've done one for the training community, and I called it the Top 10 Tangible Techniques to Take Training to the Top. And so it's all about what are the things that we can let go of. You know, and again, I don't want to be critical because it's well-intentioned. It's really people that are well-intentioned. But there's just tremendous opportunity for us to get back to the basics and really focus our energy and efforts on the things that we must do. And it's also about managing the risk. You know, it's ultimately the CEO kind of going, ooh, on this one I feel a little bit nervous, so I need to use my judgment on this, and maybe I'm going to do a little bit more on this one because the circumstances before me indicate to me that I need to do something more. But generally, and I guess I'm a pretty trusting person. That I believe in the system, I believe in the market, I believe, you know, that people are honest. And I will tell you, it's worked out pretty well for me. As I was a CO, it worked incredibly well for me. Got procurements done fast, never had a protest. A lot of it was luck. And I did billion-dollar procurements in less than a year. And so I've trusted in the process, I've trusted in the players within the process, and it's worked out well. And I've saved millions, if not billions of dollars for the citizens of this country. So I believe in the system, and I think we've lost trust in each other along the way, and it's no surprise given what we see going on in Washington. But I think that's an element that's contributing to all of this. We don't trust each other anymore.
So I'm going to jump in because all three of you said something interesting. It's all about leadership, right? And so, and being with the Department of the Treasury, we have 5 bureaus, the biggest one being IRS. And I know it's a hard mission to love and embrace, but they're necessary. But we buy everything from major IT to, we also have manufacturing because we have the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. Without them, you wouldn't have the money you carry around. We have the US Mint. We have financial crime enforcement. We do all kinds of interesting things, 90% of which requires contracts. But what I said earlier about we have papered up the process to a point where our folks can't function unless leadership engages. So I very consciously did a couple things. I had each one of the bureaus identify their major acquisitions that are coming up that are mission critical. Not necessarily by dollar, but mission critical. Like Bureau of Engraving and Printing, the new 10, we're buying printing presses, only 2 manufacturers in the world. Long lead item, very difficult, requires a lot of stuff, right? So instead of calling it an innovation lab, I go to the bureaus once a month and we have the contract specialist bring their customer, bring their legal office, bring the small business specialist. The contract specialist briefs me, and if it's IT, the CIO, because FITARA, so we have a joint responsibility on what is the approach, what is the strategy, what is the risk, where do they need my help. And they have started owning the program. Before a contract specialist, if you said, what is it you're trying to buy, you get the blank stare and they look to their customer. I need for them to be able to articulate what is it you're buying. You don't need to be an engineer. I mean, I've worked for the Air Force and I've worked for Maritime, I've bought chips and airplane parts and R&D. But I always wanted to know, what is it you're trying to buy? What does this do for you? Why is it needed? And so I have seen them over the last year gain that confidence. We've been able to remove barriers that were artificial. But it's about the leadership. Because if something goes wrong, I co-own this. I'm sitting there saying, it's okay to do this. And by the way, the FAR, the guiding principles, gives us that flexibility to use judgment. That's what it's there for. We don't need a new FAR, we just need to use it right. So I think this whole leadership piece is so critical to demonstrating to them that we're with you, we get it, we're here. It's a huge time commitment for me, but I will tell you, I see huge payoff. We now get phone calls from the bureaus where they say, hey, we want to try this, can we talk to you about that? That's the innovation we want. That's the let me think away from the template. The other thing we are doing, we have instituted a Biggest Loser policy diet because I'm so flippin' tired of policy, and I own policy. But we keep ours to the must-have. But for every 1-page policy I write, IRS writes 30 because they've been crucified. You know, and right, wrong, or indifferent, they have been crucified over everything. their process, they have so many reviews, and the reviews, when I first looked at their PALT, their acquisition lead time, you can't buy anything under 2 years in the IRS. That, it's basically, you gotta be kidding me. So this year, what we're doing is the biggest loser policy diet. We're actually sitting with IRS and teaching them, no, you don't need all this. You're actually rewriting the law, which isn't particularly smart. And let's fix it. Let's get it down to where the contracting officer on the front line has a policy document they can actually work with. So we'll see, but it's actually kind of fun to drive those changes.
That's great. Why don't we take a quick pause and see if anybody in the audience has another question? And also people on the phone. Hey, what a surprise, Mike.
So I'm the government chair for the ACT-IAC acquisition community of interest. So I have lots of questions, of course, but you mentioned leadership. Right now, what I've noticed is that mostly you have leading the 1102s out there, or other 1102s. Have any of you pondered or have thoughts on non-1102s leading 1102 communities? So yes, you see that response.
I do, because I'm fighting. Let me repeat the question. So your question really goes, we've been talking about 1102s leading 1102s. Your question is, have we considered having non-1102s leading 1102s? I'm actually having that discussion with one of our bureaus who are contemplating putting a non-1102 in charge of an operational contracting office. I am vehemently opposed to that. I have seen, and like Melissa, I'm basically a trusting person. I assume everybody's well-intentioned. I have seen way too much abuse in that process. You need an 1102 leader who understands the nuances of the business, who can say to a high-level customer, no, you cannot direct or influence this acquisition. Here is how it has to work, but also explain the options, right? I think you need that technical expert and the leadership combined to truly lead a good operational contracting organization. Plus, I would, there is this sentiment that leadership's more important than the tech skill, and eventually, what I heard this week is, eventually we'll flip them to an 1102, and I said, no, you're not. Because here's the concept. We have spent 20 years professionalizing this series with positive education requirements, with certification and training requirements. All of us who've been in this business for a long time have grown through this and gained that experience. The risk of putting a non-1102 in charge of something like that, I would not take. I would not delegate my procurement authority to a non-1102.
And I would agree with that, and I tell you, it was probably a year ago that I changed my thinking on this. Because I was of the belief prior to a year ago that if you get a good leader in there, they can lead any kind of functional business line that they need to lead. But how can you get the stuff out of the way for your workforce if you don't technically have an understanding of the business? And that's what I see managers and leaders, their jobs is to get the stuff out of the way. I had a boss once that said, you hire the best and you get out of their way. And I believe that, and I'm becoming more of a believer of that the further I go along in my career. And so I absolutely agree with Iris that in this business in particular, the technical skills are absolutely critical to be able to provide that top cover, to be able to get the stuff out of the way for the workforce that are on the front lines.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
That's a great question, though. I like that.
I'm not an 1102, so.
Yeah.
You're not? Well, that's why you can't join us. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just, it really is a great question, and, coming from the IRS, over to DHS, we tried that. We really did. I mean, and it said, hey, can we put a program manager this level in charge of this group? And we did it because we had, as we have today, great partnerships. You have to partner with your program community and build teams. DOD is probably the perfect model. When I was at DOD, I loved it. We had all these purple teams and green teams and blue teams, but it consisted of everybody to move the project forward. So it was really good because you had everybody in the room and you had one lead. And when we had that one lead, it didn't matter if the lead was an engineer, it didn't matter if the lead was a CO, because you had a program. And that was the difference. So when you're running a program, it works extremely well, I mean, in my opinion. But if you're running an organization, and it's an 1102 in that series, if you can't speak the lingo, I mean, we have so many acronyms, and everybody has acronyms, it's like, we're not even sure what they are sometimes. But when you have somebody that's a non-1102, working in that series or trying to be up here at that, to lead that organization, and can't speak that, needs to go to the Hill, needs to go here, needs to go here, they can't speak that language. They can't speak the contract terms. It's like us speaking contract terms. Iris made a good point. Know your program. Know what you're buying. I mean, we know this, but we don't know the totality of it. That's why we need the program. So we did try it though. I mean, but it just didn't function, but it works. I think DOD, I think you have a great model with the program side.
Absolutely. You have the program teams, but what you see is the 1102s come up in that career field, but then they'll branch out. And so even in a lot of the key program jobs, you have people who were previously 1102s and now they're program managers. So they understand the business. And you get a lot of management of people's careers to develop into those jobs within the services. And all the services have models where they use that.
I think you actually made a great point, because
Right.
when I was in DOD, I came up as an 1102 through the copper
Right.
cap, but I spent 3 years as an 1101 program manager.
Right. So you
Vice
have
versa,
background.
yes, I had the background.
Right.
But I don't think you can take a program manager and have them run contracting. The nuances in acquisition and contracting specifically are so intricate sometimes, and what you can and can't do and where those lines are. Unless you have that technical knowledge, you have no credibility in the community.
But I think with what you guys just said, I think there's great value, and I think we need to find a way to create opportunities for our workforce to be able to move in and out. The technical skills that you develop in the contracting career field, as well as program management, they're very transferable. And I think there's great value, and probably I've kept my sanity, all these years in this business, because I haven't stayed in operations the whole entire time. If I had, I probably wouldn't be as passionate as I am, because I love this business. I love it. And how many contracting people do you find that loves it? And the reason is because I've moved out of contracting and I've come back in, and I've come back in way stronger. And so I think we really, from a career development, a talent management standpoint, and we are looking at this at FAI to figure out, is there a way that we can create that opportunity to enable our workforce to go out, and even into industry. We piggybacked, when I was at the VA Acquisition Academy, we piggybacked on the Air Force's Education with Industry program. We were piloting it to give our contracting officers an opportunity to go out and spend some time in industry. And if we can offer those kinds of opportunities to our government workforce, they're likely to stay with us instead of leaving to go out to industry and then coming back. And so we're looking at ways to perhaps give them opportunity to get that break from operations, get a different experience in the context of the larger acquisition life cycle, and then many will come back and they'll be much more stronger because of that experience. So we're looking at that to figure out ways that we can offer that opportunity.
So if you want to learn more about acquisition in general, or you're interested in what these folks are talking about, I'll give a plug for Melissa's website, www.fai.gov. Just so much information about acquisition. It will answer all your questions. But that said, we have these experts here. Who else has another question? Yes, sir.
This might be an obvious question, but I just wanted to play off of what Melissa just said. That is, you guys have been very honest with us about some of the challenges that you're confronting and dealing with. What can we from industry, how can we play a role, if at all, in helping?
So I'll take a shot at that. So the question was, how can industry play a role in helping us address the challenges that we've shared here this morning? And so I would say, and again, I'm working along these lines in my new role at FAI, we need to provide opportunity for industry, government learning together. So I'm a big fan of and I've characterized this as one of the missing links to, I think, why we're where we are. How do you maintain the proper arm's length relationship? But is there an opportunity for us to learn together? And so in my former role at the VA Acquisition Academy, we created a course called Market Intelligence, where industry is actually invited to participate in that training event alongside of government personnel. And I think to the extent that we can offer more training opportunities like that, where industry, we're in there together and we're better understanding the roles and responsibilities, the lines of demarcation between each, and how do you maintain the integrity? How do we ensure that as we're doing market research, we don't steal your company proprietary information and then put it in a solicitation? So that's what this course is about how do we strike that right balance? How do we engage with industry to understand industry capability out there without compromising the integrity of the acquisition system? So I think that's one area, is working with us to identify where are those training opportunities that make sense to learn together would be one suggestion that I would have.
I've got one that I'll add. From a DoD perspective, and even during my time with Air Force, one of the things that really kept me up at night was the talent pool that we all go and recruit from. And what are we doing collectively to help grow that talent pool and make sure that those skills and those people are there when we need them? So we're all kind of in isolation developing recruitment strategies, even amongst federal agencies. We don't necessarily get together and do that a lot. And so we're all going to the same places, participating in the same career fairs, recruiting the same people, a lot of times using the same incentive type programs to try to reel them in and get them to come into our workforce. But what are we doing collectively to help grow that pool, to grow the talent, to make sure that 5 to 10 years from now, the educational programs that are in the schools are producing the right people that we need to hire and continue to run our acquisition program. So that's one of the things I think we can do better and partner with industry, partner with other federal agencies, and in some cases state governments as well, to do a better job of that.
So DHS actually has positions called industry liaisons. And could you talk a little bit about that and how you partner with industry?
Yeah, I was going to get into that. I mean, each one of our components, which is 9 components, that are the buying agencies, we have an industry liaison for each one of those, which is on our website, by the way, dhs.gov. If you go out there, you click on it, industry liaison. And these industry liaisons, what they do is we're trying to get away from that model of we better not talk to industry, until we know what we're going to buy. So we broke that model. We actually broke that model. And we bring industry in one-on-one. We bring them into industry days, which sometimes I've heard, industry is not that great. But what we have done is when we start major procurements, we have brought industry into those major procurements. And the industry liaison actually coordinates all this information. So if you have great ideas, we have these industry liaisons out there. They will coordinate and get you to the right people. They will actually, each agency will say, wait a minute, I hear you're doing this. This is on your forecast. I'd like to talk to so-and-so. I've tried program manager 20 times. It's listed on the acquisition planning forecast, can't get through. An industry liaison will get you in touch with that individual. And they will work to make sure you're in touch with the right individuals. They will make sure you're in touch with the right contracting individuals. So we have reached out and done all that in all our major programs, and we partner really, really well with industry, plus our chief information officer. So we know the program's coming down. Soraya Correa and Luke McCormick have been going out with industry and making sure that, here's our major programs coming up. This is what we want to do, and this is how we want to move forward. We need your input. You want the experts. You guys are the experts. A lot of cyber stuff going on. A lot of cyber stuff. We need that expertise. Those industry liaisons add that value and make sure that, we are getting people in the door. And not just, hey, company X. It's every company that wants to participate. So utilize them. Believe me, I do. Utilize them and overutilize them. And if you don't get through, it's really as simple. There's another number listed. So there's alternate numbers. Someone is going to answer you. I guarantee you will get an answer. So use those individuals. But we can't do it without industry. What we do is a strict partnership. And sometimes, a lot of people say, yeah, that's a bunch of smoke and mirrors, but it's not. It's not. Every contract we issue is the who. So we have to have the right partnership. And we have to have a good partnership. but we have to have open dialogue. And that open dialogue sometimes is where we get into how much is too much? When is it too much? When is it proprietary? When do you stop that? And I say you stop it when the solicitation is issued. Okay? Before that, hey, have at it. Let's do great thing. Once that's issued, then the CEO is the responsible person you go to and get the dialogue on it. So.
But I would add that make sure you do your homework. Make sure, it's always better to come in, especially if you get an opportunity to have one-on-one sessions with the government, to have done your homework, make sure and I always say follow the money, make sure you know where their priorities are based on the budget. And, rather than coming in saying, what can we do for you? It's coming in saying, I know you have this as a priority and this is our capability that we think we can help you with. So it sounds obvious, but I can't tell you how many companies I've met with over the years that have come in and just asked, what can we do to support you?
I would also add, understand the organization that you're marketing to. Making appointments with me isn't going to get you a thing. I don't buy anything. So I love this. I must get 10 requests a week or more. It's like you're wasting your time. What we're trying to get to at Treasury is something I did at VA, where we had the advanced planning briefing to industry with every year on all of our IT programs. So once I'm corralling all the CIOs, we are going to do this. And we've had a couple of my younger folks came up with this idea. They want to go out with what they call a reverse RFI. They want to understand what things in our solicitations cause you to bid or not to bid, cost more money, recommendations for what can we eliminate. And we want specific answers. This is going to hit the street any moment now. I actually thought it was a fabulous idea. If we can do away with some of the stuff we make you do that causes pain that I'm not forced to do by law or regulation, we'll get rid of it. So I encourage you, if you see this, please give us your input.
Great.
I think that's an important thing too, and I get that industry would be hesitant to bring to the senior procurement executive or the head of the contracting activity, rather than protest. And I'm actually glad that we've got the system in place that enables the protest process when it's appropriate to go down that path. But I think, I would suggest considering, in lieu of a protest, and again, it's your decision whether you want to protest or not, having that honest conversation with the senior procurement executive or the head of the contracting activity around systemic weaknesses.
And then I can give a great example. I had a small company in VA that was a BPA holder, and they couldn't get any orders. And they called me up and said, can we come talk to you about that? And legal, everybody went, oh my God, they're going to protest, don't talk to them. And I told the president of the company, I said, we can have one or two conversations. You will come in, you will tell me how wonderful your company is and how wrong the contracting officer is. Okay, I'll listen. Or I will have my folks do an analysis of why you're not successful, and we'll have a very honest conversation of why that's happening. They chose the latter. I laid out to them what they did wrong in their proposal. And an hour later, the guy walked out and said, this is the best meeting I ever had. And I said, well, you want to be successful, and I want to help you get there. But then let's have that honest dialogue. And I think it was absolutely worthwhile doing. You will find a lot of people in government will be too risk adverse to have that dialogue. I'm generally not known for being shy, and I'd much rather deal straight up. So what is it that benefits both of us?
So anybody on the phone have a question? You all have been pretty silent.
Yes, this is Anofi Hessler with the Secret Service.
Hi.
Hi.
What's your question?
I know that acquisition workforce includes more than just contracting, but it's been my experience that a lot of these discussions, when you bring up workforce planning and acquisition workforce planning, the conversation is always geared towards contracting, and of course the acquisition workforce is more than just contracting and 1102. So I'd like the panel to address, as they can, how they go about building their program management workforce, the PMOs, how they staff them, and if they can discuss some of the maybe some issues that they find working with their HR departments in recruiting and retaining acquisition workforce other than contracting. So if you could speak to other disciplines.
That sounds like a Max question.
Sure. So from a standpoint of development,
Oh, I'm
she was on the
sorry.
phone.
Okay, sorry.
All right.
I get you guys well trained.
Sorry.
So this is Max White from DoD. So I think the first part of the question was about how you develop program managers and what tools you look for other than just contracting, I believe. So in DoD and the acquisition workforce, it's obviously more than contracting. But what I saw when I was coming up through the Air Force as far as workforce development and what I see now across DoD is a lot of your logistics skills in terms of your logistics management specialists end up in the program management field. You also have your quality assurance people that are on that team and they end up in the program management field as well. In the logistics areas, we have some item managers, your general supply type fields that we have career counseling that they can get in terms of different opportunities, different bridge positions that they want to look at in terms of getting into the program management field. So when you get up into your 1101 or your 340s and I'm talking job series now, your program managers, they're different feeder series that you can have, but our Defense Acquisition University does a good job in terms of the certification programs and the training that people need in order to lateral in certain areas and then become certified to perform in those positions. So a lot of kudos goes out to them in terms of having a framework that managers can look at and see, okay, how can I develop somebody and get them certified in this area of acquisition to go manage a certain program beyond contracting. So I think they do a good job there. I'll let somebody else speak to the HR challenges, and then I can answer that. So, all right.
Just for the folks on the phone, this is Dennis. I mean, just say, Department of Homeland Security, we have the Homeland Security Acquisition Institute. And I mentioned earlier the Acquisition Professional Career Program. That has 9 disciplines that we work across our department to make sure logistics, program management, cost estimators, engineers are trained in this program for a 3-year acquisition program, okay? So we work real close with all the acquisition because, when you look at acquisition, some people say big A, little a, all that good stuff. Acquisition consists of a lot of disciplines across the agency when you say acquisition. So we know that, so we partner. And then we partner with our CHICO office, our Chief Human Capital Office, to make sure that once we bring these people in, not only are they trained in the program, but they're positioned at the end of the program, which we have memorandums of agreement and stuff with different agencies, different components and stuff that they sign and say, okay, we need 2 logistics people. We get these people in, they train them, we bring them in, and then they pick them up at the end of the program. So it's not one of those things that says, okay, now what happens? But it's 9 different disciplines to include the 1102 series. So I think that works well. When you look across an agency as big as we are and you look across to other agencies to say, we have to do this as a community. And if you build your own within that community, I mean, not everything built within, I mean, you still have to go out and advertise, don't get me wrong, I mean, but if you build that and you work with your partners within, the community gets closer. And not only does it get closer, but we learn each other and we build that trust that we need each other, not only at the top level, but the whole way across. I mean, so we do have those programs within DHS. I mean, I just wanted to add that. So.
I just think historically in the civilian agencies, we have done a poor job recognizing that the acquisition workforce is greater than contracting. It doesn't help when you look at FACT PPM comes out of the Office of Federal Procurement Policy, so everybody thinks, okay, here we go again. So we have historically not done a good job like DoD or DHS as well ahead of us in developing that acquisition core that has all these disciplines. I think there is a recognition now that we need to do a much better job. And I know I'm working with Joni and Melissa on the whole FACT PPM and FACT PPM IT core. Treasury barely has a FACT PPM program, and program managers are harder to identify by series and contracting people, so that's made it difficult. But, we're working it. I mean, it's definitely, we're recognizing there is a need to have an acquisition team that has the same basis.
And I would just add, program management has not gotten the recognition as a discipline or a mission critical asset the way that contracting has. And I think in many ways it's the root cause of a lot of the problems that we have, because everything begins with requirements definition, and that's, that comes out of your program management office. And so there's lots of reasons why program management and the civilian agency side has not gotten the traction that it needs to have. I think, to Iris's point, I think we recognize that, but the challenge is, how do you convince the other agency senior leaders and the stakeholders that we need to make that kind of investment for the long-term good and capability of the organization? And it's been a tough sell, and I've sat in those, high senior level operational positions trying to convince and make the business case or present the value proposition. And so Iris mentioned we're working, and with many of you in the room, on a cross interagency group to really look at why have we not seen the adoption that we need to see? What can we do to increase the adoption and the investment that people are making to mature that program management discipline and capability on the civilian agency side? And I probably won't get the statistics right, but we did a data call of the job series 2210s in FedScope, and that's your IT management job series. And on the civilian agency side alone, there were about 50,000 GS 2210s in the civilian agencies. We did another data pull from the system that Joni mentioned to determine how many of those folks are certified with the FACT PPM IT specialty track, and it was about 50. And there's some question, with regard to, not every 2210 needs to be a program manager, okay? But I would suggest that we probably have a gap there.
Well, I think programs fail, not because you have a bad contract necessarily, it's because we don't have the management skills to manage. Getting to contract award is the easy piece. Managing it through delivery of that critical component or service or whatever it is, that's where programs fail. And I think if we look at the cost of failed programs, if people finally realize and make the connect to that risk, maybe then we get the commitment to make this a professional series and put the emphasis in the training.
Right, and that's what, so, we had this summit last month and some initiatives emerged from that. So we're gonna be looking at this hard to figure out what can we do to help build that program management capability on the civilian agency side. So lots of questions, boy, we've
Andy.
Yeah, Iris, with what you just said about it being, a program management issue, but when programs fail, how much of it is an acquisition issue in terms of not defining the requirements properly or not selecting the right contractor?
Okay, so the question really is, when programs fail, how
Yeah.
much of it is an acquisition issue in
Right.
terms of requirements definition and contractor selection?
Yes.
So the requirements definition also comes from the program manager, right?
Right.
So I think and I deliberately, as a senior procurement executive, still read statements of work, because I don't want to lose the connection to what goes on out there, and I think it's important I get it. I read some of the stuff that comes in, I have no earthly idea, what we're buying. I don't know how industry would ever bid on this, because I don't understand it. I have no idea what this is. But the contracting people, like I said earlier, they no longer have that experience to read it and say, what is it that's important? How do you prioritize what you're trying to buy? Let's get to a better requirements definition. And quite often, especially on the civilian side, lack of acquisition planning means we get the requirements in the third quarter. There is no room for these wonderful draft RFPs and draft statements of work, which I love because I think it's critical. We don't have time for this anymore. So we slap something together, we put it out there, we get the contract in place, and then we wonder why we have problems later. And I think also the other piece that's missing is that team approach. That's part of what I'm trying to foster with these map reviews we do, because it is the acquisition team. They need to understand what we're buying and how to define it better. And we have a Treasury Acquisition Institute, which I'm sort of repurposing for joint training. Because I want requirements definition needs to be a joint training exercise. This is not a program manager and a contracting officer. They need to be in the same room, hear the same thing. But yeah, definitely need to fix that.
And I would add to that too, that we have not seen the traction of performance-based contracting that we had hoped to see, because I think we're over-engineering requirements definition in a lot of ways. If we trust in the performance-based acquisition approach and stay outcome-oriented, I'm telling you, we spend way too much time in the requirements definition phase of the life cycle. And so pre-award can be done much faster. You get better, more innovative solutions. It's less painful for industry. The challenge with performance-based acquisition, and I think we have opportunity to train our workforce, the big A workforce, including your program managers, you have to manage that far different than the detailed requirement spec, you know, when you're building a major weapon system for DoD.
Right, but that also requires understanding what it is, you know, the program has what it is they want. And I've
Right.
seen a lot of acquisitions where they buy something because it's a hot new thing and
Yeah.
not any realization what they're going to use it for.
Right, and that's the whole purpose of performance-based, is being outcome focused. What problem are we trying to solve? And you can write that requirement up in a couple of pages.
How
you know?
long has performance-based acquisition been
Oh,
on?
it's been decades, and it hasn't gotten the traction. And again, it requires a very strong contracting officer that can convince the program officer to trust in that process. And I'm going to help you get the outcome that you're looking for. And so we have a tendency, you know, in government, it's probably human nature, it's some loss of control, right? Because I'm not going to tell you how to do it. And so we, I think as human beings, have a hard time letting go of telling somebody how I want you to do it. And again, I've used the performance-based acquisition approach on really big procurements, got them done fast, got great innovative solutions, industry loved it. You know, the program office loved it, the taxpayer, the citizen of the United States got what they needed. And so I think there's opportunity there for us to really re-engage and again, look at why has performance-based acquisition not gotten the traction that it needs, and what can we do to give our workforce the confidence that it will yield them the results. If they do it right, it will yield them the results that I think they're seeking.
I still see solicitations where they're asking for resume of key personnel, like anybody cares. The company has the obligation to deliver an outcome. I really personally, why are we reading resumes?
And how much time we're spending rewriting those
I know,
resumes.
and it's like, to get that through to some of our program people, and I think it's a loss of control issue.
Yeah.
I just really don't care. It's your job to put the right person in place who can deliver the solution I need. It's not my job, and I'm not interested in getting involved in that. But it takes so much convincing, and I think it's part of that.
Right.
We overcomplicate the requirements process.
Right, and then that whole issue on key personnel becomes an administrative nightmare. Back to my days in post-award, I was constantly doing mods to switch out key personnel. So I agree with Iris, if you're outcome focused, I don't care who you bring to it, you're accountable at the end of the day to deliver the outcome that you promised us.
I used the example the other day, when I go buy a new car, I know what I want that car to do. I don't care about the qualifications of the guy who built it. I'm just not interested.
And you're not telling the manufacturer how to build the car either.
I'm not interested in that. I just, here's what I need, and here's what it needs to do. That's what I'm interested in.
Right.
And, you know, it'll take a lot of us convincing and teaching and training in this community to make that change.
And I think that's the way we started, getting back to the basics. I like that
Yeah.
concept, getting back to the basics. Bring these things in, you know, let's take the risk. You know, I agree, do we need all these resumes? You know, but those are things that it's hard to shift the paradigm.
Yeah.
So you bring them in so the management can take the risk, so it doesn't feel like the people down below aren't taking this risk. We eliminate resumes. What? You know, we don't need a technical report. What? I mean, those are the kind of things, but we have to own that risk. The leaders have to own that risk. I mean, it's always nice to say it, but if we don't own it and we don't support it, you know, then we're not going to get the results. So, and that's the way we started. And I think, you know, as long as we do that, we'll move the workforce forward.
We had a question over here.
Yeah, not necessarily a question, it's more of an agreement with Melissa and Iris. I'm in VA, in the HRA. I serve in an oversight function. One of the major challenges we noticed in HRA was a lack of certified program managers. We have program managers by title, but not really by certification. These other offices do most of the heavy lifting. And most cases, it turns to a domino effect of poor requirements equal late packet submission to the contract office, equals a third quarter consideration or fourth quarter award. It's rushed. All the work is being done on the back end to fix it and mod it. And so what we've done is we've identified who is faculty BM certified, and it's a real shortage. Last year we sent about 5 or 6 of us to faculty BM, and still need about 20 more. And so we have identified that shortfall. We are taking steps because our problem really isn't acquisition; it's more management of the contract.
But the lack of managing that whole process that you have identified, conservatively, I would say costs the government 20% at the end of the year because we slap stuff together that
Yes.
requires rework. We get poor outcome. We don't redefine to a degree necessary, and industry has to price in that risk. So conservatively, we could save 20% if we just got to a better place, a better structure, better process.
Yes.
And I will just, I know VA, has gotten a bad rap, on a number of things in the last couple of years, but the senior leadership of VA really has made the commitment to mature the program management capability across that department. And as Dennis said, it will take time to turn that ship around. It doesn't happen overnight, but I will tell you from my experience at the VA senior leadership at the highest levels recognize the value in a mature program management capability, and they have made that investment to develop the workforce in that way. So good for you to keep hanging in there.
Yes, one more question.
You guys noted that when you're looking for new 1102s that you poach others from each agency. What are some of the attraction strategies you use to get new blood into the workforce?
So it's a recruitment question. What strategies do these folks use to recruit 1102s into the workforce? And who wouldn't want to be an 1102? I mean, honestly.
So one of the things we did when I was with the Air Force in terms of recruiting new 1102s into the overall federal workforce was working closely with select colleges and universities to actually develop curriculum within their business programs that was aligned to and really certified by the Defense Acquisition University. So we had students that were going through bachelor's degree business programs, getting a minor in government contracting, right? So on track to being 1102, and then hire them into an intern program and be able to develop them. So actually growing that pool of talent. But the other thing it did as well was we weren't fully burdened by the full cost of training, because the state and the student were paying a lot of that training and development costs for them to actually learn those skills and get that education while they were getting their bachelor's degree. So that was one example of something we did when I was with the Air Force, and we're trying to expand that in some other areas across DoD in order to increase that pool of talent and bring in fresh 1102s.
I was just going to piggyback on that. I actually went for my master's degree in government procurement way long ago, and the university, I went to a satellite center at Hanscom Air Force Base, and they also had a satellite center at Fort Meade, and the government personnel got first choice, and us industry got, whatever seats were left. And so that was what that's what the Air Force was using, and this was 35 years ago.
Right. And the other thing one of the tools we have is the expedited hiring authority that we've been able to use the past few years, and the ability to give those on-the-spot job offers at career fairs and those kind of things to people that are highly qualified and able to get them more quickly into the workforce than your traditional delegated examining authorities that can take 3, 4, 5, 6 months, sometimes even more, to get somebody on board where they lose interest, but be able to quickly assess people into the workforce.
I would also challenge us, so as a community, I think the education of what government contracting offers needs to start in high school.
Absolutely.
I didn't wake up one day and decide I want to be a contracting officer because I didn't even know what that was. I was born and raised in Germany and actually had to start over again to get a business degree here. I had a degree in languages, and none of them were Spanish, and I was living in California. So I thought, okay, this is interesting, so here I am, so what do I do with this? And I went back and got a business degree and came in through an Air Force Copper Cap intern program, because one of my neighbors said, oh, my wife is in contracting, you ought to try it. And I'm thinking, what does contracting And I was fortunate, I had fascinating, fabulous leadership when I started with the Air Force. They did a great job. But I think we need to tell folks in high school who, you know, have an interest to what is it we actually do and how exciting is it? Because 80% of what the government does is through contracts. We don't do it, we don't produce anything really. We don't build airplanes. But how fun that can be to be involved in something like that. One of my first contracts was the F-111 terrain following radar. The F-111 doesn't fly anymore, but when they used it in the Gulf War, I'm sitting in front of the TV going, I bought this. This is so cool. Of course, my sister in Germany called me an arms dealer because we're. But it's really the excitement about the mission, what you contribute to accomplishing this, and you know it's when you connect people to that mission and how much fun that is. That's where the passion starts. And I think if we need to convey this in high school. High school counselors don't know this stuff.
But I would say, I believe the supply exceeds the demand right now. I will tell you, I mean, we post a vacancy announcement and we get thousands of candidates. And I tell you, they're high quality candidates. So I think word has gotten out that this is a great career field. And so I think we're doing a great job at the entry level, and we're hiring really smart people at the entry level, way smarter than I was when I came into this business. And the kids today, and even mid-career type change folks that are trying to come into the field, the quality of the baseline of what they walk in with is phenomenal. I think we have opportunity to really look at our mid-level. You know, I think we've kind of forgotten about our folks in the middle, and I think they have the hardest jobs of all. I think we have opportunity there. One interesting thing on the civilian agency side, the positive education requirement is different for the civilian agencies than it is for DoD. DoD requires the bachelor's degree in business to get in the door. On the civilian side, it's any kind of bachelor's degree or 24 semester hours of business. And I will tell you, and I'm a business major so I can say this, I think one of our gaps that I see that we have, and we've heard that we didn't talk about on the panel here this morning, two things: critical thinking skills, problem solving, and writing. Who are your best problem solvers, critical thinkers, and writers? Oftentimes you're analysts, you're liberal arts majors. Not to say that business majors can't do that, but I will tell you, when I was in operations, I was really, on the civilian side, I was looking for the liberal arts majors because I believe in diversity in the workforce. I don't want all business majors. I want to bring in the way that liberal arts majors think and the way they look at things, the way they analyze, the writing skills. I will tell you, hands down, the writing skills that I've seen out of the liberal arts majors are better than what I've seen out of the business majors. And we've got a national problem with writing skills. It is atrocious. And like Iris, I will tell you, I read 200-page source selection documents on billion-dollar procurements. I get to the end of it, and I ask myself, why are we selecting the company that we're selecting? You haven't been able to convince me in 200 pages that this is the right vendor to select. And then I get really mad because I've just wasted a half a day reading a 200-page document. So writing skills, we have a huge gap in that area, and I look for, when I'm hiring people, that have really good analytical skills and good writing skills.
So let's let Dennis have the last word, and then we'll have to wrap up because our time's about done.
So, I believe it's all about mission. I mean, but you got to know what the mission of the agency is. And once you learn the mission of the agency, creating that application going out, people will apply. The fallacy we have in some of it, how do we create career opportunity? And some people say make it a ladder position, that's career opportunity. Well, it's 9 through 11 career opportunity. It is, in my opinion, it is, because once you create that 9 through 11, you give them a set. You train them, you bring them in. Then they have the opportunity to compete with them. So yes, it is. But it's all about, do you understand the mission of what we do? I mean, and that's where people get enticed. So I used to like going to colleges and stuff when budgets were cut. Well, you can't travel no more. But those are the opportunities. When you get out there and you get to speak to these young individuals to say, wow, I'm really looking for this, but I heard the federal government really stinks, you know? That's our job, to tell them, no, 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 no. Let me tell you the great opportunity here and what this is about. That is our job, I mean, you know, because press can hurt us. I mean, really hurt us, you know? Our job is to make sure that, hey, if a press thing comes out, me personally, I'm glad when the IRS is in the news because it takes it away from DHS.
Yeah, we're happy to share.
So hey, DHS, we're fine now.
I'm trying to keep them out of the
But press will wear you out. I mean, you know, and believe me, every human being, the first thing we will do is find a negative in something. We'll never find a positive. So what I ask individuals all the time to say, when you read this, find a positive. Let's get the positive. Let's work on the positive and eliminate the negative. Because the more time you spend griping on the negative, the less we're going to get something done. So we have to do that, but we have to do that with people as well. And that's why I said, you know, you build a trust. Once people get in the door, you know, the in brief is nice, but you have to still go around and meet people and talk to people. You have to get to know what makes them tick. They have to know what makes you tick, me tick. I mean, you know, so we've been in this a long time. So if you gain that trust and you build a relationship, individuals are naturally going to just get motivated. They're going to be motivated to come to work. Because if you ask somebody, you know, what excites you to come to work, and you get that blank stare, you're in trouble. I mean, you know, so we need it. We need to do that. We need to, you know, a lot more just to get out there and say, what does excite you to come to work? And if you get the answer telework, you're in trouble too. No, I'm just kidding, but we really need to get out there and talk to people, and that's where I think we're losing people skills. You know, leadership-wise, we're so, you know, embedded with, okay, what's the next policy coming out? How does it affect this? Let's rewrite this. Let's do this. And we forget people's skills, the soft skills that, you know, we need to get out in the environment. So that would be my last comment. So
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for a very stellar panel. Please join me in thanking her.
I would also like to thank Joni for helping me put together this stellar panel. And again, I want to reiterate, if there's anybody from the press, and not just the press, that this is off the record. You know, we are videotaping it for the members who have, members who couldn't make it today. But if anybody is looking for a quote, you know, let me know. We'll get you in touch with the right person. So thank you again.
Thank you.
I should have added